Ich habe mich mit dem Thema Resilienz befasst und ihn in Bezug gesetzt zum Militär, speziell zum österreichischen Bundesheer, habe dort unterteilt zwischen der personalen und organisationalen Resilienz.
So I came to the conclusion that it's important to actually promote and live both the personal resilience and the organizational resilience. The term as such is nothing new for the Austrian military, and it actually is something that permeates the military in all its aspects. This was my contribution. Dr. Trauner talked about the religious point of view and talked about the old wine versus new wine. He covered terms of resilience, diversity, narrative, under the aspect of old wine in new tubes, new wine in old tubes, and so on. And his conclusion was to actually question all these terms and update them. And this was very interesting and important insight. This would be a chance of neologisms, of new terms. It's better to put old wine into new skins. That was his summary, because the new skins can hold the old wine, while the opposite is not possible. Trauner. So that was Dr. Trauner. So now we have Stefan Gugerell. He focused on religion and the state. He actually looked at religion as a narrative community in the first part of his talk, where he considered religion as the actor that narrates, and the modern nation state as a secularized religion that provides new narratives and also highlights new problems. Stefan, I know this is very, very brief. Of course, there was much more in this. The people who were listening to you, they know that there was more. But the final point was the international community of nations and their narratives. He said that it's important to have a basis, to have a community of values so that people know what the state stands for. Then Dr. Ebner talked from the Center of Human-Centered Leadership and Defense Policy, talked about hybridity in detail, and also the hybridization process, not just the mixture of heterogeneous cultural elements is important. And he gave us many examples, mentioned migration as one of the examples. It is important to allow the mixture of cultures, and the intercultural aspects are a new chance for the development of societies and cultures. And finally, our last speaker was a very interesting talk. First, we looked at social sciences viewpoint, and our last speaker, Professor Hanus, actually showed us in an impressive way that also in the cultural heritage, in building culture, and he told us, he gave us a great element, the reconstruction of an Italian village that was destroyed in an earthquake and was rebuilt. First, there was a emptying, the place was emptied, but then everything returned with the physical reconstruction of the village, where also cultural elements that had been hidden in part were rebuilt, and this led to the return of the bells that were used again. And in the first part of his talk, he reported on the Danube Limes in the sense and showed us how cultural heritage works along the UNESCO lines, because the ultimate goal of this project is to put the borders of the former Roman Empire onto the list of cultural heritage sites of UNESCO. And so we have seen how diversity permeates many, many topics and makes them lively. Now we're going to look at the other panel. Good morning, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Thomas Packard. I work at LAVAC here. I'm in charge of strategy. This is my core business, so to say. I moderated the panel on strategic culture and geostrategy. It was a panel that we also had at the two previous conferences. We started with consideration on the title on strategic culture in general terms, to become aware of how complex this topic is, and the title of the panel, Strategy and Culture, even strategy being not so clear, but also culture is a term that can be defined in many different ways. And so what is strategic culture? In order to make it even more complicated and complex, geosciences, geoscientific strategy, and this was the starting point for our deliberations and discussion. And we actually saw that there was a certain arbitrariness in the approach to it, going back to Clausewitz, who said that everybody believes what he knows best. So we tried to focus a little more. We expanded the approach of cultural strategy and came to a traditional approach of strategic culture, with the central element being the holistic approach to strategies, with all their actors that are being included, not just the state and its role. We also talked about why we are talking about strategy, what is the value added of this concept. There is a certain attitude of the other side in the discussion. So it's about understanding the other, to understand the actions of the other party, their motives, and to explore their motives. And this leads to a situation, if I try to understand the other person, I need to do a self-introspection first. And the limits of these concepts are pretty clear. Not everything can be forecast. It's not an instrument to make a prognosis, a precise forecast, but it can be useful for some decision-making processes. In the panel itself, we had four panelists. I would like to sum up briefly. Eva Fronczak from the University in Warsaw reported on the American strategic culture. She is working on the American strategic culture in her studies, and she was talking about the specialty, the American exceptionalism and the hard facts in the military. In the U.S.-American politics in general, they are more offensive, they are deployed more offensively. And then she also talked about the culture of the trans strategy and the compilation of the concentration and the administrations of Obama and Trump in a comparison. Dr. Schneider reported on the strategic culture of Great Britain under the title Rule Britannia. He talked about the history and focused on 4 central parameters by which the strategic culture of Great Britain can be sketched very well. First parameter being identity. The second, briefly summed up, the feeling of superiority of the British way of life, which was actually ringing in the First and Second Industrial Revolution. Second parameter, geography, the island position, and the strong role of the Royal Navy, and the importance of the Navy for supplying the British Empire, and the role of the Navy in war. And Dr. Schneider also mentioned the role of Great Britain as an unsinkable carrier in the North Atlantic in both the First and Second World Wars, and also during the Cold War. Third parameter, the resulting from the first 2 parameters, and the first parameter, the security policy, the contours of the British security policy, the dominance of the world seas, the role of the Royal Navy, again, a relatively small country with a strong global presence, and that distinguishes it from continental Europe. Professor Spiro from Warsaw then talked about the narratives in the current strategic culture of Poland, and argued very strongly, based on historical facts, the history and the lost sovereignty of Poland over the past 100 years, and argued that the presence, the lack of presence, was due to the loss of the intellectual elites, which actually also led to a lack of capacity for strategic thinking in Poland. A second point that Professor Spira dwelled on was the modern and postmodern contours of individualism in Poland, and that they're seen today, which is a certain obstacle to strategic thinking for the community. Professor Spira also highlighted positive aspects, such as he was looking into the future optimistically, and looked at the development over the past 25 years for Polish leadership, and the rise of their new role in NATO, which has led to a growth of strategic competence in Poland again. And Professor Spira closed with the central element of strategic considerations in Poland being the setting up of a strong Polish state that supports the external and guarantees the external the security of Poland. Last speaker was Chiara Liebeseller with a very different kind of topic, as she was reporting not on a specific national culture, but she argued that the strategic studies as a strategic science and culture have to be taken as such. She questioned very strongly, as we've seen here at the conference, the trend of using new terms again and again, the drawing up of new concepts, and she was asking whether these new terms and concepts aren't something that are simply reviving old terms and old concepts, and also talked in a great way why this was so. And she looked at it from scientific view And Dr. Levi-Seller then actually said that innovation was always looking for new concepts and new terms. Only if you are innovative, you are really good at publishing and can publish. This is the coin of science. And this is a cycle that is closing this way, because only if you're innovative, you can publish. And so if you want to stay on top, you have to come up with something new. Concluding, I would like to say it was a very interesting panel. The initial point was not so much what is strategic culture, but shouldn't we really extend this particular panel for another day and a half? I would like to thank all panelists once more for their interesting input, and I'm looking forward to their publication, and I'm looking forward to the strategy conference in 2019, and I hope I will be able to moderate this panel again. Thank you. I would like to thank you to both panel moderators, Dr. Schuh and Dr. Pankratz. Thank you. The first time we asked ourselves, what is strategy? We tried to define it. And we decided it has to be thought of in a general, overall way on a state level, national level, where the military plays a part. And the military has to be able to be active at the interface. At the second conference, then, starting from this definition, we decided to find a structure for a possible core subject strategy to be taught. The basis for the panel organization and the topics was actually worked out at the second conference. And if we ever wanted to write a book about strategic thinking, these structured elements would be chapters and sub-chapters in this book. The third conference this year, after we have provided the definition and the structure, and that are reflected in the respective conference publications, and after evaluation of this, we have tried now to go for a specific topic, implementing the structure as a framework for this year's conference. As you saw in the invitation to this conference, we have a group of founding members who have been supporting us from the beginning, who also support us when there is no conference. One of them is Professor Schweftan, who is supporting us in a fantastic manner, and he has introduced a positive, critical approach. You have to be clear, he said, that with this interdisciplinarity and theoretical approach, you are going in one way, but if we want to look back at the interface with the practitioners, there's something missing here. We don't really have strategic decision makers who are active at the interface with politics, and this is why we decided last year, immediately after conference, to introduce a so-called practitioners panel. And Dr. Schweftan not only gave us the idea for this, but he invited some people, and I'm happy and proud and grateful that we have this practitioners panel here today. We got Professor Schweftan. We've got Brigadier Feichtinger, who is well experienced and versed in the world of strategic decisions, and he's going to moderate the practitioners panel.